This is the James Dixon Podcast. I am your host, James David Dixon. As always, we're here for a good time, not a long time. Today, I am joined by my friend and colleague, Tim Golding. He's State Director of Americans for Prosperity, Michigan. We're going to talk about two things today. First, we're going to talk about the property taxes in Michigan, which have become a real problem, especially as we're heading into the ditch economically. And then we're going to talk about what we just learned from Mike Duggan, his run for governor, the excitement it created, and ultimately his untimely demise. No one probably imagined he would be gone by Memorial Day, but gone by Memorial Day he was. Tim, thank you for joining me. Tim, I think it would be fair to say, if you live in Michigan, the property taxes are too damn high.
They're insane.
They're insane, right? And so I'm a history guy. It feels like right now we have about probably more property tax related activity and talk than we've had since, Proposal A type days, since like the mid 90s, and then going back to the Headley amendments in 1978. So let me just kind of set the stage here. Why do people feel the property taxes are so high in Michigan? Did something change?
I don't know if something changed in the recent past so much, is that things have accumulated to make the cost of having a house unaffordable for most people. And when you put the property tax things on top of that, it just accentuates the problem, and people can't afford to live here. The taxes are too high. And to your point earlier about first time some major changes look like they could be taking place in our tax, the way our property taxes are done, you're right, it's been a while, but it's long overdue. And I commend Speaker Hall and the rest of the House Republicans for working to get this stuff going.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where perhaps consensus unravels over time. It took some doing to get the Proposal A reforms, but now we're 30 years into that, and I think we need a new deal. People are saying, this person I'm about to name does not get a lot of love in Michigan political circles, but I think she deserves some amount of credit. I'm thinking about Carla Wagner, right? The Axe My Tax proposal,
Right.
property tax abolition. I think when I talked to Carla, I told her there's two things you need that you don't have. One, you need money to make a ballot. And two, you need academic muscle. You need to partner with someone like the Mackinac Center, someone who can make numbers pencil out. But could you speak to there's a contrast here, right? There's an excitement generated by property tax abolition as an idea, and then we've had repeated efforts to make the ballot and it didn't make it. Speak to the excitement.
Oh, there is a lot of excitement. If you could get rid of property taxes tomorrow, that'd be fantastic. People would love to have more money in their pocket. It's our money to begin with. It's not the government's, and they've just been taking it and wasting it for decades. Carla Wagner's Axe My Tax, from my point of view, was never really fully thought out for whatever reason. Like, hey, let's just talk about cutting taxes, property taxes across the state, try to get people to sign the signature forms with no... I didn't see a real solution on the back end. Like, how are you gonna backfill that revenue loss, like for schools and stuff like that? Which Speaker Hall has a plan for that. I don't think she had that, at least to my knowledge. And to your point too, there was no real muscle behind it. No Mackinac Center, no real prominent think tanks, not a lot of local or of established leaders from the state behind it. And I think she was just kind of on her own. I commend her for the work she did. She worked hard, no doubt. There's a couple different attempts at it, a couple different bites of the apple, as I
Right.
recall. But to your point too about money, that's the mother's milk of politics. And if you don't have money, you're not going to get much stuff done. Which it's a reality we all have to live with.
It is. I mean, so there's nothing that happens automatically in politics. I didn't, expect to bring this up, but it kind of it fits naturally. Every 16 years, we're asked if we want to do another constitutional convention in Michigan. And what I find fascinating about that is that it's an automatic proposal, takes no money to get it on the ballot, but because it never has a champion, there's no human beings ever touting it, it never happens.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. It's every 16 years, and the last one was in the 60s, I think.
The change happened in the Constitution of 1963, and so then from like 64, every 16 years after that, we keep getting asked again. And
I think people are afraid of that. I think if people not complacent, but like the Constitution. They don't want people messing with the Constitution, and by and large, I don't either. The federal and the state constitutions are pretty well done, but there should be some changes maybe. But I think people are afraid if you open up that can of worms, what could transpire, what could happen from either side. Doesn't want to see the crazies take over and make some crazy constitutional amendment that we have to, or change that we have to see another 16 years go by before we can change it. So I think people are apprehensive because of that. They're afraid of it.
Right. Wholesale change isn't really how we operate in Michigan. There's a reason we're 63 years into a constitution.
Right. Yeah, I think if you throw an idea out there and you don't have a framework and a plan to make it happen, people just see it as an idea that can never come true. I think when you see the package of bills, the Help Up plan that Speaker Hall put together, it has a framework and a plan of different bills that are going to attack these tax issues and energy issues to give people real relief when it comes to property taxes and energy. And when you put an idea out there, if you put it on paper and then you have a framework to work off of to show people what the end result's going to be and how you're going to make up for some lost revenue or whatever that looks like, people say, oh yeah, I can get behind that. I can see where that could work and that could benefit me and my family.
Right.
Versus some pie in the sky thing, let's just cut property taxes. Well, yeah, I'd like to cut all taxes, every single one of them, but that's just not the reality we live in. It's certainly not in the near future.
Yeah. Could you talk about the Hall plan, the Help Up plan? So, you go from this extremely outside of politics effort. Carla is a proud outsider to politics, even left the Republican Party during the campaign season. But then property tax reform gets probably the best champion you could get outside of the governor's office, the Speaker of the House. How close does Speaker Hall's reform plan get to abolition?
Well, it's supposed to be get rid of the property tax in general, and there's lots of parts and pieces to it. But one of the bills in there will get rid of the personal property tax that businesses have been paying for years.
Yes,
they changed that years ago for some portions of business. This bite of the apple will, as I understand it now, effectively get rid of almost all the personal property taxes for manufacturers, business, energy companies, and everything else, which is a massive savings. That's hundreds of millions of dollars.
So if we could explain what that is. So personal property tax is like sometimes you'll drive by like one of these John Deere, sales companies, right? Like on the side of the road. All those tractors, all those pieces of equipment, you have to pay tax on those every year. And so that makes it very expensive to be a business owner if you're affected by personal property tax. And you also have to pay property tax on the land that the John Deeres are on. So it's just another one of those expenses that makes it tougher to operate.
Yeah, the way to think of it is the personal property tax is a piece of property or equipment that you can pick up and move. A real estate tax, is land or a house or a building attached to it. Those are two different taxable entities. So businesses, manufacturing, let's say, they buy a $5 million lathe. They pay taxes on that. And as you know, businesses don't eat those costs. They pass them on to the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
So if you eliminate that huge chunk of tax that a business is going to pay on telephones, copy machines, big equipment, things of that nature, again, anything that you can move off a site, that's a personal property taxed item. It saves the companies millions. They can reinvest that in their company. They can grow their company. They can add employees. They can increase wages. They can do a lot of things. And as I understand these bills, as it relates to energy, these energy companies that are spending billions of dollars in their infrastructure, if they get savings on stuff that they purchase, they're required to pass that savings on to the ratepayer, which is huge. That could save people a lot of money.
That would actually make a huge difference because at least DTE, that's the one I'm subject to. Detroit Electric used to be Detroit Edison when I was a kid. And the thing about that is DTE is required to have a 10% profit per year. So if you were to save on the other end from the expenditure side, you could see some of that money come back. And I don't think any of us think our energy bills are especially cheap right now in Michigan. So this is the kind of thing. People say the energy bill is too damn high. You're paying for it with the credit card. This is the kind of thing that could actually cut costs for people.
Yeah, part of the Project Lighthouse energy package that they have together in conjunction with this is going to roll back, hopefully, I think it was Public Act 233, the green energy mandates where you're carbon neutral by 2040 or whatever. That has driven costs up for energy because these companies, DTE consumers or whatever, have to rework their infrastructure, add on build new equipment, whatever that looks like to accommodate these green energy mandates, that all gets passed on to consumer. If they roll that back, that's a price savings to the ratepayer, to the citizens of Michigan. There's also in this bill package a bill that will roll back some recent incentive or price increases, rate increases, and then put a rate freeze on. That's going to save people money. So you put all this stuff together with the property tax issues that we're trying to solve, the pop-up tax, the real estate tax, the personal property tax. Those are real dollars. That's I think an average like $5 billion that's going to save Michigan taxpayers. Again, that's real money that people can put back in their pocket. They can pay for an extra soccer camp. They can pay for groceries. They can pay for whatever they want. Because remember, it's our money. It's not the government. So I commend Speaker Hall for putting all this together and the work that they're doing, because it is going to make a big difference in people's paychecks and their pocketbooks. It's going to allow them to do more things, to have more control of their life, and to, what I really like about it is make housing more affordable. You know,
Right.
It's going to allow,
Right.
if we don't have that pop-up tax, it's going to allow senior citizens to be able to downsize without worrying about some huge tax increase in the new place they're going to buy. And the younger family that's going to buy that house, that the rate's been capped for a long time.
You're not left
They're gonna
holding
get
that bag. Yeah.
You're not going to see these massive increases. That's thousands and thousands of dollars. And the real estate transfer tax, that's in here. If you get rid of that, I think on the average a good number of like a $300,000 home. The state sticks its sticky fingers in that transaction. It takes $2,500 out roughly, just to transfer the transfer tax. That's insane. They don't need to do that. And if we get rid of that, again, that's money that goes back in the consumer's pocket to be able to afford the things that they want to buy, and not give to the government that gets spent on programs and things that they don't want that money to get spent on. So it's a huge deal, and I am looking forward to it. And then if you bring that together with some of the housing and zoning reform packages that we're kind of trying to get pushed and get signed into law, that's going to allow us to build more homes on more land, houses that people want to build, the square footages they want, on acreages that they want, and not be mandated by erroneous zoning mandates across the state that say you have to build a 3,000 square foot house on a 10-acre parcel. Some people don't want that. They want to be able to build what they want on the property that they own, when they want, where they want, and how they want, as long as, again, it doesn't infringe on health and safety issues or public utilities and stuff like that. It doesn't infringe on any of that.
Now, we know Speaker Hall is a very creative man. It's not that he copied Carla's homework by any means. Are we talking property tax reform if Axe My Tax had never existed?
I think, yeah. I think there's been an appetite growing in this state, especially since COVID, when people, kind of the curtain was pulled back a little bit on school, people got more involved in politics, paying attention, podcasts like yours and other platforms that have made more information available to people. I think people have taken a harder look at what's going on in our state and where their dollars are actually going and how they're being spent. So, can't say with 100% certainty that if Carla had never existed, we wouldn't be here today. But I do think that Speaker Hall and some others in the state legislature would have gotten to this point at some point, because it's due, it's needed, and Michigan families, if you look at every metric, outbound moves, educational outcomes, income tax rates, corporate tax rates, all of that puts us in the bottom of almost every metric. We're going in the wrong direction. The leadership's been horrible for the last 7-8 years. There's an appetite for these changes, and I think they would have been here without Carla Wagner's help. And I do commend her for doing what she's done. It takes a lot of effort and courage to try to get something like that done.
Our friends at the Mackinac Center, they talk about the Overton window, and when we say we're moving the Overton window, basically what that refers to, you're changing the people's idea of what's possible to achieve in Michigan. So something like vouchers for private schools in Michigan is outside the Overton window. It would take some doing to get it in. Whereas I would say property tax abolition was outside the Overton window in 2019. But the way things have gotten, like Tim described, the COVID crunch, all of that, and just realizing that money and opportunity can be very scarce in Michigan, and we have to be guardians of this, change the Overton window to where real property tax reform is possible, and there is a widespread understanding that the property taxes are too damn high.
And if you look at other states around us, their property taxes are non-existent or smaller, much less than we have. And again, I think people have just come to realize that, we can make a difference. The Overton window is shifting in a lot of different things, and it just takes people with courage, conviction, willingness, and stamina to make these things happen. Because again, these people that we elect work for us, and if we don't like them, we can vote them out. But we also need to partner with them when they're doing good things, and that's what we try to do: elevate and amplify the good things coming out of Lansing or Washington, so that citizens can get involved and help with the process. It's our process; we belong to it, and shame on us for being ignorant of it. Just like people didn't pay attention to schools for decades, right? Well, shame on us for not doing that. Now people are paying attention, and they're seeing that Overton window can shift. And hopefully we make all these good changes. It slams shut and it never gets reopened, and they can't come back and keep clawing away all the freedoms and liberties and dollars that are ours. People are awake now, and they're seeing that. And we talk to people every day, both in Michigan and across the country, and they're fed up, they're tired, they want things to change. And organizations like ours and others are changing things. And but it's a death of 1,000 cuts. It takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. It doesn't happen overnight. But people do see that there's an opportunity now, and I think you can see Matt Hall's trying to take advantage of it.
And that's something I would have you all understand. Nothing happens, A, overnight, or B, on its own. And our vice president, J.D. Vance, recently talked about it, how, he was addressing the idea that there's some people disillusioned with what's happening in Trump's second term. And he didn't try to change your mind, but what he's saying is, if you don't like what's happening at whatever level of politics, get more involved, not less. And I remember, I graduated high school in 2002. We had, and there's this picture from around the turn of the century where Kwame Kilpatrick I think he's Senate Minority Leader, and Rick Johnson, the House Speaker at the time, are getting sworn in together. And I was in high school back then. And as a young man, you think that the state runs itself and that there's this political class of people who it's their full-time job to think about the state of Michigan and its operations, and that those people can be trusted to do that, and I could be a kid. Turns out I needed to be thinking about running the state even then, because both those guys ended up, I think, going to prison. I think Rick went to prison, but certainly Kwame did go and was sentenced. And what you learn in that picture that seems so innocent, but you look at it years later, character is destiny. The reason I'm involved in politics right now, the reason you guys, inspire so many people to knock doors and give testimony, I think, is this idea that politics is too important to be left to politicians.
100% true. And I lay the blame at the feet of, quite frankly, our public education system for the last many years. When I was a younger person in school in the 70s and 80s, in high school, or grade school and high school, civics was taught, politics was taught. You were an understanding of how government works, at least at a fundamental or a base level. 3 branches of government and all that separation of powers.
I'm just a bill.
Exactly. And money doesn't grow on trees. And it's our money that we give, that the government takes from us. It's not the government's money. The government doesn't make anything.
Mm.
And I think the school systems have failed students in showing them the importance of being involved and paying attention as a minimum, and not just ignoring the chance to go and vote, that it's a real honor to go do that and to choose the people that are going to represent you. And I think if we get back to a place where people understand how government actually works and how money actually works, again, we can make bigger changes in our country and in our state. Because it's not a government that works, that tells us what to do. We tell it what to do. It represents us. But if we don't let them do it, to your point, you do end up with people who don't have your best interest in heart. We have to pay attention. And that's what Americans for Prosperity does every day, is try to plug people back into politics and policy, and help them find their voice, elevate their voice, encourage them to get involved. Because again, if we're not out there fighting for our freedoms and our liberties, the government will take everything we give them. And if we're not looking, they're going to take a lot, whether that's our dollars or our freedoms or whatever. They're going
Absolutely.
It's an insatiable appetite that they have. It's a vacuum that almost can never be filled. And we need to fill it with stuff and good people that want to have good policies, like these reducing the property tax and other things for us. Because again, if you let them, the government would take absolutely everything that we have, and you'd be happy with nothing.
You will own nothing and love it. So we're talking about this property tax reform. Here's the problem. Were it to even become law in Michigan, which, let's admit, is unlikely right at this second, because we have a Democrat-controlled Senate, we have a Democrat governor, and those guys love taxes. So they're not going to sign on to any kind of tax relief. But even if we did get it, here's the thing. Property taxes wouldn't go away at that moment either, because I think about all these millages that just passed in May. There was one in Roseville, near where I live in Macomb County, $175 million millage. 4,000 voters decided it. A 200 vote margin decided it. So you have 47,000 people in a community, and 200 voters decided whether, in the end, it was the margin. 200 voters decided whether a $175 million tax would pass. And
Isn't that insanity?
And I think we have to think about the year-round nature of the calendar, right? So Speaker Hall, he's doing his thing. He's trying to change things. Rep. Matt Maddock is trying to make it so these millages could only take place in November. But what we just saw in May with a good deal of those passing shows the problem, where government is growing in its own ways and for its own reasons, largely disconnected from what we want.
Yeah, they're sneaky. They put those millages in May because they know the turnout is not good. Is not going to be the turnout's conducive to their victory.
Mm-hmm.
You put most of those millages in in November, in the general election, where the greatest turnout is. People are most engaged, most plugged into what's going on. They're tuned in. They're paying attention to the candidates and also the ballot initiatives and everything that's there. They actually do their research. I guarantee you that more and more of those millages will fail, and we won't have 200 people deciding to spend that kind of money in a community. You would have a better buy-in from all the community. We need to get that, and I commend Matt Hall for trying to get that passed. I hope it comes to fruition at some point, because it would save communities tons of money.
Is property tax reform complete if millages are still allowed to take place in May and August?
Somewhat, maybe. I mean, people, again, can vote on those things, those millages, those increases, right? But the $6 million one, if it goes away, then that's a huge chunk of money. That's what, $1,000 on a $300,000 home. The state equalized
That's
value
massive.
is $150,000.
That's massive.
So you're spending less money if that goes away. I mean, the way I look at it, I don't care if it's a penny or $100,000. If the government takes it from me, I want it back. And if this property tax just saved a penny for every person, good. That's a penny that we own, that's ours, that the government can find another place to cut spending and not have to get that money. Because housing in Michigan is too unaffordable, and this is a good way to help change that and make people want to be able to live here because they can afford to live here. We don't have a revenue problem; we have a spending problem, quite frankly. And some of this is supposed to be offset by a luxury tax, like limo rides, private planes, golf club memberships, taxing that. I'm not 100% on board with that, but it is a way to, I guess, offset some of that revenue. But again, if it was for me to decide, there'd be a lot broader taxes, a lot lower taxes, and not make it even or equitable, but just make it more affordable for people to live here, the cost of living go down, and that's one way to do it.
Absolutely. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, James, you talk about Michigan is shrinking, Michigan is stagnant. So how could we be shrinking and also need more housing? Could you thread that needle for everybody?
Michigan's torn down a lot of houses. If you like Gretchen Whitmer.
Mike Duggan in particular in Detroit tore down a lot of housing stock, whether we think it's quality or not. But yes, it has been moving in that opposite direction.
Yeah, and there's like 125,000 unit shortfall in the state. I can't give you an exact reason why, but yeah, there's just not enough homes, and people aren't moving out of 4,000 square foot homes into older senior homes. That doesn't open that home up for a younger family that could move into that, like traditionally happened in the past. So there's not the turnover. That's an issue. Building permits, I think 20 some years ago, there was 50+ thousand new home permits issued in 2024 or 2004. In the last couple of years, it's been 16,000 permits or less issued, roughly. So there's a huge drop off in the new homes that are being built.
And builders didn't just say, hey, we're not interested in building homes anymore. There's clearly cost factors and regulations that would explain that difference.
Yeah, and being someone who built homes for 25 years in Southeast Michigan, it's a lot of different factors. It's cost of materials, it's cost of land. There's a lot of different fees in there, or a lot of different costs in that. But one of the biggest drivers is the availability of land to build on. When we have communities that are exclusionary in their zoning on what size of house, on what size of property, and communities that are being built, sometimes you exclude people, and it's not a it's not a financially profitable thing for a builder to do. They're not going to build, so they'll go to Indiana, they'll go to Ohio. And you see that there's a lot of builders that aren't building in Michigan because they don't have the land, they don't have the money's not right, as it were, you know. And for individuals that want to build their own home, we saw a lot of that too. Where again, everybody doesn't always want a, you know, 2,500 square foot house on 10 acres, and that's what a lot of townships have. If you clawed some of that back and let people build whatever they want on whatever size lot they want within reason, then you have more people building homes because they're not spending money that they don't want to spend on a house and a piece of land. And you got to maintain that land in the end. I personally like having a lot of land. I like to go out in my backyard and go hunting and do stuff like that, but there's a lot of people that don't. They want a simple house in a walkable neighborhood, and a lot of those things can't be built anymore.
This did have a political angle. There was a little bit of political intrigue when the property tax reform bills moved through the House. You had Karen Whitsett, the Detroit Democrat, kind of come in like Willis Reed in Game 7 and, you know, kind of give a vote that Speaker Hall actually needed to help this thing happen. And then you had a Republican stalwart. You had Rep. Jamie Green vote no on it. What should people make of those respective moves, if anything?
Well, I like Jamie Green. We like her. She's a good rep. She's very much a person who likes local control, meaning local township control.
Absolutely.
I'm more of a property owner control type of person, so we would disagree strongly there. And there's a couple other reps that are quite frankly opposed to our housing and zoning reforms because it doesn't allow the townships to dictate what size of lots you build on, for example. And I think that's her mindset. I commend her for standing on her principles. That you commend people for that. But I also commend Karen Whitsett for coming in and voting what I think is the right way to give more control back to the property owner, more money back to the homeowner, and their property taxes getting reduced and stuff like that. So why Jamie did it, I think she felt it strongly, went against her convictions. She said, I'm not doing it. So, but luckily it passed. I'm glad.
She argues that the reform is more of a tax shift as opposed to a tax cut. Is there anything to that argument?
I don't think so. If she could explain that to me, I'd appreciate that. I don't.
Rep. Green will be in touch. Now I'd like to switch gears a little bit. You know, we just dipped our toe into politics. Let's just jump all the way in. Last week, we got crazy news from Mike Duggan, the one-time mayor of Detroit. He was running as an independent governor. Jesus Christ. Last week, we got crazy news from Mike Duggan, the one-time mayor of Detroit. He was running as an independent in the governor's race, but then he withdrew. He withdrew right on the eve of the Mackinac Policy Conference, which is happening as we record this right now. So people were shocked by A, the decision, and B, the timing. I think it's undeniable that at one point the Mike Duggan candidacy did have momentum. Why did that allure people?
Well, he was the write-in mayor for Detroit. He won. He did some decent stuff. You can't give him all the credit, but the allure, I think, was something different. Like, hey, this guy's running as an independent. Now, we all know he was a Democrat. Always has.
Absolutely.
Always would be.
Absolutely.
And that's the reason I think when he got out of the race, somebody probably said, hey, you need to drop out. This isn't looking good for our preferred candidate, maybe. And he chose to back out at that point. But he could never divorce himself from the fact that he's a hardcore Democrat. Always has been, always will be.
No.
And I think someone maybe put the bug in his ear, like, hey, you need to step away so that our preferred candidate can win. And the excitement around him, I'm like, he started last year putting billboards. You couldn't drive anywhere in this state, in town, on highways, interstates, anywhere without seeing his face, talking about the good things that he thought he did for Detroit. I thought it was I was hopeful that he'd stay in the race just to kind of, help some other candidates out maybe a little bit. I still think the conservatives have a great chance of winning. Don't get me wrong, with working hard and getting their message out. But it does kind of change the dynamics of the race. And, it's a lot of energy and a lot of money and a lot of resources that were just kind of flushed down the toilet, really, for him to drop out this soon. I mean, I heard rumors that people thought he'd drop out in July, maybe, or, closer to the end of June. But this was definitely a bombshell. It created a lot of talk around Lansing and around the state.
I think the part that shocks me is the reasons he cited where there's both a struggle with polling and a struggle with fundraising. I think all of that was completely predictable from the moment he declared to be an independent. So you would think that someone who's this master of politics, as we've heard, would have anticipated this. Why not just run as a Democrat?
Because I think he believed he didn't have a chance to win as a Democrat, knowing who else was going to get in the race.
So a little Michigan history moment. There's been one time when Michigan elected an independent candidate statewide, or chose that candidate. They didn't ultimately win. 1912 presidential election. Theodore Roosevelt runs as a third-party candidate. Michigan actually supported Roosevelt in that election, but just as it did nationally in the governor's race that year, because TR had a slate around him, the governor's race, that math was also split. And so Michigan and nationally, Democrats end up winning those races. Mm-hmm. And so my thing was always Michigan supported TR. Duggan was no TR. But here's the thing that surprised me. TR tried to raise up a movement around him, right? There was other Bull Moose candidates. It wasn't just one guy. Why did Duggan not become a movement? Why was he always only a man, which is the easiest way to beat him?
I mean, that was a long shot. And I mean, again, kudos for trying. But was there an ulterior motive even when he got in the race as an independent? You know what I mean? I don't know what goes inside of Mike Duggan's head, but it definitely changes the dynamics of the race, 100%. But again, now if you're on on the conservative side of the ticket, the Republican side, it gives you a clear target. Basically, Jocelyn Benson's probably going to be the person that comes through that primary. At least that's what all indications say right now. So, quite frankly, it gives them the opportunity to start going against her and painting her in the way that they want to paint her and against themselves, all the Republicans left in the race. So, it'll be interesting for sure. I think because he's always maybe portrayed himself that way, and he's always been a Democrat. And I think people actually, if they got to maybe learn about a little bit more about him or whatever, saw that he truly was just a Democrat running as an independent. He was not truly an independent. He wasn't a different movement. He wasn't a different horse to ride. He wasn't an awe-inspiring type of a candidate that got people riled up and ready to make changes, because they knew, I think, deep down that should he have gotten elected, it would have been the same old from a Democrat point of view, and nothing would have changed in our state except for keep going in the decline and all the metrics pointing in the wrong direction for our state. And I think that's probably why people didn't see him as any different than the Democrat that he's always been.
Who was the Duggan-curious voter, and how do you win those? How does a Republican win them? How does a Democrat win them?
I think it was maybe some swing voters that were looking for something different, that are frustrated maybe at the national level, frustrated with some of the stuff that's happened recently in Michigan. That swing voter that can vote either way. There certainly were Republicans, that establishment Republicans, that were supporting him, and I hope that the candidates that are running on the right side of the aisle now actually go after those donors and supporters and say, hey, Mike's dropped out. What are you going to do now? What are you going to do with your time and your talent and your resources? You're going to help us. You're going to help the Democrat, because those people had always been more conservative and Republican. So I hope it gives an opportunity for the other candidates to go tap that well and say, hey, he dropped out, dropped the ball. We're the best option for you now.
Right. Almost like you might have had your unique affinity for Mike Duggan, but come home.
Yeah, like you tried that for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Time to come back to the corral and get on the winning team or the conservative team and start supporting the candidates that you've always championed in the past. You tried this different flavor soda pop and you don't like it. It didn't taste good in your mouth. It dropped out of the race, whatever that looks like. Now come back home to the party that you always been a part of.
Now, why did those people defect in the first place?
I think, again, because I think they were tired, maybe because of some of the frustrations at the national level. That certainly trickles down. Maybe some of the stuff that's happening with the state legislature in the last year and a half or 2 years. I don't really know the ultimate reason. They just thought there was a different path, somebody that would look at policies in Michigan a little bit different than the status quo. And if you have a true independent, which Mike Duggan never really was, in my opinion, that would have a different look on things, a different spin, maybe be more willing to work across the aisle and things like that and get things done for the state, for its citizens, instead of the politicians and the lobbyists. So I think that was the appeal. And, well, that appeal's gone now. So they got to find a different place to get involved or not get involved. but I hope they get involved with the party that they always have been in the past.
Absolutely. I think about the 2018 election, and again in 22, you saw kind of on the eve of Election Day, Republicans for Whitmer groups just pop up and say, oh my God, we think the Democrat's the best candidate. And you could say they were leaning into history, where the Democrats were due to win that one, and they certainly were going to win re-election no matter who had run in 22. But I don't see Jocelyn Benson as that candidate. I don't see her as attracting that middle of the road, could go either way. I think she's pretty much the candidate for the hardcore Democrat. What do you see?
The exact same thing. And I think people, if they do some digging and they do some research and they look at who she is and how she's run the state and the Secretary of State as the Secretary of State, and quite frankly, all the mistakes she's made in her campaign, let alone that, people should give some real pause to her viability as a candidate and someone that could run this state in an effective, efficient way. I don't think she has, in my opinion, the favorability that Gretchen Whitmer has right now. She doesn't have the name recognition. She certainly has improved her odds now that Duggan has dropped out by leaps and bounds. But she is not, in my opinion, someone fit to lead this state and get it in a direction that's going to make businesses and families want to come here and live here and stay here and start businesses here, whatever. I think if we get 4 more or 8 more years of that, we're just going to continue to see the same old. Educational outcomes go in the toilet. We're 44th now. Less than a quarter of the 4th graders can read at a proficient level. There's no metric in the education system that you can look at today that says we're doing a good job. We're doing a horrible job, and we've gone from top 10 to the 44th. So you take all that. She's been a part of all that. She would be no different. And going forward, should she get elected, we're going to have more of the same and worse.
What's your read on what happened with Jocelyn Benson? As I've researched her, when she first ran for Secretary of State in 2010 and lost against Ruth Johnson, she was saying, I would take an oath of nonpartisanship. And then by the 24 election, she was being, a federal judge was saying that she tried to manipulate the presidential ballot. So basically, if an RFK wanted off, she kept him on. If a Cornel West wanted on, she tried to keep him off. Just whatever would help the Democrat team. How does someone change that much in 14 years, or was it a change?
Probably wasn't a change. It just was hidden. I think it's hard for a leopard to change his spots at that gravity or at that level. Being in office or being here, probably, just the nature of the beast got to her and wore her down or made her not afraid to be her true self. The Southern Poverty Law Center, all that different stuff. I mean, there's a lot of questionable things there, and I'm not saying that everything in our elections is not above board. There's a lot of good things that happen in our elections, a lot of honest clerks and everything else. But she definitely, in my opinion, put her thumb on the scale and tried to make elections lean in favor of her party. Whether that's sending out the requests for absentee ballots and all the different things she did and all the changes we made to our voting in the last couple of years, she was part and parcel of that, and I think that's just truly who she is. And I think should she be elected governor, we're probably going to see more of that at a higher, quicker rate than we want.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question, and we'll end here. Help us paint the picture. Jocelyn Benson's been elected governor. They say in politics, you don't want to throw someone off the ledge. You just want to show them the ledge. We have to show people the ledge to understand. I don't think she would be any different from Gretchen Whitmer. If not, and if she is different, it's because she would be worse, because she's more of a true believer. Whitmer is more of a cynic who's just kind of selfish. Benson actually believes that she's part of a bigger team, and that team needs to, do regime change in Washington ultimately. Governor Jocelyn Benson, what could we expect? Your Americans for Prosperity. Would she make Michigan more prosperous, less, and how?
I don't think there's any way you could ever say that she'd make America or make Michigan more prosperous. If you look at what's transpired over the last 8 years, basically while she's 7.5, 8 years, whatever, while she's been in her office and Whitmer's been in power, nothing has trended in the right direction. And all kinds of things have happened, like with the elections, like with her campaign rollout. I think they have an appetite for gaining more control. And just look at the budget as a minimum, right? Our country, or our state, has lost population,
Right.
and yet our budget has gone from when Whitmer first took office, I think was $54 billion. The last budget she proposed, a couple weeks ago, whatever it was almost $90 billion. So we're losing population. Every metric that you gauge our state by is going in the wrong direction, and yet our budget is $90 billion. My life is not $90 billion better than, you know what I mean? And so I think if Jocelyn Benson was elected, you're going to see more of that, because those people absolutely do not want you to make decisions for yourself. They want government to take control of absolutely everything in your life. They might not say that out loud, but their actions certainly prove it. Whether that's taxes increasing all the time.
Oh, absolutely.
Fees, regulation, the red tape, bureaucracy, that all increases under democratic control, just like Public Act 233. That hasn't in any way made our energy more efficient or more affordable, and it never will. There's not any place in the country you can prove that shows energy rates come down and gets more reliable because you do these green energy mandates anywhere, and they put a solar field in, whatever. There's no proof to that. So they know they can do it. They're going to keep doing it if they get a chance. So I think if she's our governor, we're going to see higher taxes. We're going to see more regulations, more red tape, more government handouts, more corporate welfare. Go down the list. All the things that Speaker Hall, kind of put the brakes on, and what passed 17 public acts last year or whatever it was, some crazy small number. Maybe it wasn't 17, but
I think it was 75, but it was the lowest in modern history.
So instead of hundreds, it's less than 100.
Right.
That's what you get with strong Republican conservative leadership. You get less government and more money and more freedoms in your home, in your life, for your family, and for your business. With Democrats, you get quite the opposite. And you can look at the last 7 years in this state, and you can get a good picture of what's going to happen if she gets elected. Unfortunately, that would be the reality.
This is Tim Golding. I'm James Dixon. And the question I would have you all ask yourselves and ask your friends is, am I better off than I was 8 years ago? Maybe you are. Maybe you got a promotion. Maybe you've been blessed with children. But I want you to ask, in the sense of state government, that's grown so much from $58 billion to now they're trying to, get it closer to $90 billion. Has it improved that much? Has anything they've done in Lansing made your life better, or have they made it harder and more expensive, more costly to run a business, and made sure there's fewer dollars in your pocket? You can't do the same thing and expect different results. So we're going to be talking about these issues a lot more. We're going to be talking every month up through Election Day about the issues at hand in Michigan.